But when you take 10 tiny little factors and add them up, it can become a very large deal that'll make the difference between success and failure oftentimes.
Welcome to the Rich Outdoors, where we break down the tips, tactics, and strategies of hunting's greats to not only help you become better hunters, but to motivate and inspire you between hunting adventures. For more about us, including additional resources on our guests and links to everything we cover in the interview, check out therichoutdoors.net. This episode is brought to you by GameCallSupply.com, the online authority in hunting calls. GameCallSupply.com not only has everything you need to call elk, deer, ducks, predators, turkeys, whatever your hunt of choice is. They're obsessed with calling animals and have all the resources you need to become a better caller and a better hunter. With great prices and fast shipping, you'll have your calls in no time and be on your way to your hunting stand. Check them out and use the Rich Outdoors Podcast special offer code TRO to get 15% off your entire order. Well, hello, and welcome to another episode of the Rich Outdoors Podcast. I'm your host, Cody Rich. And before we get started, I got a special deal for all the listeners. I was talking to the guys over at First Light because I was ordering a pair of the new guide pant, which, by the way, got named 2015 Best of the Best Gear in Field and Stream magazine. Now, I haven't got to try them out, but I will let you know how much I love them just as soon as I do. But anyhow, I got those guys to hook up the Rich Outdoors listeners with free shipping. So while you're listening to the podcast, go check out firstlight.com, take a look at the new guide pant. It's a must-have for 2015, and get free shipping on your entire order with coupon code RICHOUTDOORS. Today, I'm chatting with a very special guest that I am thrilled to have on, as he's been a huge fan of mine, Mr. Fred Eichler. In today's episode, I get to pick the brain of Fred Eichler on how to be a successful hunter and what commonalities successful hunters have that put them ahead. Fred was the first person to complete the North American Super Slam with a recurve, and in the process has come to understand what it truly takes to be successful on different types of hunts. Along with his Super Slam accomplishments, Fred and his wife have a great outfitting business in which we talk a lot about the mistakes that him and his guides see hunters making, and what we can do to keep from making those same mistakes. If you guys enjoy the podcast, be sure to leave us a review on iTunes and let us know what you think. Enjoy, guys. Mr. Fred Eichler, welcome to the podcast. It's a pleasure to have you on. I'm a huge fan of yours.
Well, thank you, Cody. I'm honored to be on.
So, it's a busy time of year. I'm sure you're running around. You got all kinds of guiding to do. You staying busy this year?
You know, it has. It's been really busy. It's great because about 70 to 80% of our guys every year are repeat clients. So it's kind of like almost like homecoming. You know, a lot of the guys, you've been hunting with them for years, and you know their families, and they know my family. So it's really it makes it a lot of fun, you know, seeing the repeat guys and, you know, just sharing stories with them. But, yeah, it started off awesome. I think we have 14 or 15 antelope down with archery equipment, which is awesome. As every year we've had a few really close calls. We had some misses that, ones that just it kills the guides as much as the poor client. You know, we've had some missed at 7 yards to 25 yards, but the excitement level on an antelope, to me it's one of the toughest because it's one of those animals, you watch them coming in from a mile sometimes, and by the time they get to you, you're so jacked up, it's hard to keep your cool. It's hard to make that shot.
No, absolutely. So, in how many years have you been guiding and running your outfitting business?
23 years I've been outfitting and guiding, and I love it. I mean, that's my favorite time is in the field. I don't like the the paperwork side of it, but I definitely love the being out in the field and guiding. That's a lot of fun.
So after 23 years and however many guides you have, do you still get to go out in the field, or are you kind of like the overseer admin guy now?
No, thank goodness I still guide a bunch. I enjoy guiding. I actually do a little bit of all of it. I guide some of the archery antelope hunters. I guide some of the archery elk, archery bear, archery whitetail, archery mule deer, mountain lion, turkey, a little bit of everything. So, I certainly don't guide every day like I used to, but I've got some great guys helping me out, and I definitely jump in, and I spend a few months every year guiding clients, and I really do. I enjoy it. It's part of the enjoyment for me, and that's why I got into it.
So going back to the early years, how'd you get into hunting, and how did you come about with a passion for hunting, and then how did that evolve into your guiding career?
Good question. My dad was a hunter, and so some of my best times afield were shared with my father, and he was a great hunter and still a great hunter today. He enjoyed it all. He did, little archery, little muzzleloading, rifle, shotgun, a little bit of everything. I actually got him into the archery. I shouldn't say that. He started out with a rifle, and the shotgun and the muzzleloader. I picked up archery when I was real young, 12, 13. I had some buddies that did it, and I started shooting a bow, and that kind of got him involved in it because he wanted to do that with me. But so that kind of sparked that interest, that passion for the outdoors. And from there, I got a job working in an archery shop, and then I worked at Bear Archery, and then I got a job managing an archery shop in northern Colorado. So really everything I did revolved around either hunting or the hunting industry, specifically archery, more archery related. And I loved trapping, grew up trapping, and kind of started doing a lot of damage control trapping on a lot of different ranches. And that gave me access to some great private lands. A lot of these guys were tickle pink that I was trapping coyotes on their ranches and, helping them with beavers that were damming up creeks or rivers. And so it got me a lot of access. So I started guiding clients, and man, it kind of went from there. Really, it's been a fun ride.
So when you decided to be an outfitter, was that something that was just you had to couldn't get enough hunting, or was it this is what I want to do every day, or what was the mindset behind you had to get into guiding clients?
Well, it kind of started. I was working for Dart International, the interactive target system company, and they made you've probably seen it, Cody, where they have the life-size animals that walk across a video screen. You shoot an arrow at it, and the video freezes.
Yeah.
Well, the first one out was the Dart target system, and Jay Dart hired me to help him out with that company. And as I traveled all over the country installing Dart systems, guys from different shops, it didn't matter whether I was in Georgia or Pennsylvania or California. Once guys found that I was from Colorado, they were like, "Wow, do you know where I can elk hunt or antelope hunt or bear hunt or deer hunt?" And I would say, "Yeah, I've got this, place that I trap on," and that guy would let me, take some guys out. So it kind of started because I was just taking some friends out working for Dart International, and Jay Dart, my boss, encouraged it. He's like, "Yeah, this is great. You know what I mean? These are our clients, and if you want to take some guys out, that would be fun." So I got my outfitter's license and started guiding basically for free. I got my outfitter's license and was just taking guys more to help cement relationships in the industry, and especially with a lot of the customers that Jay Dart had. And it seemed like it just kept growing every year. I would take some guys and they would say, "Hey, I've got my brother or my cousin, or I've got some other friends that would like to come," and it went from like 4 guys to 8 to 20 to 40, and it just kept growing. And eventually it got to the point where I thought, I might be able to make a living doing this. So I left Dart International to start the outfitting business and do that full time. And that's kind of what got me into it. I'm sorry for the long-winded answer, but there's the whole there's kind of the whole process for you, Cody.
No, not at all. That's great. So just out of curiosity, what was your longest running repeat customer? How long was that relationship?
Oh gosh, I've got guys that have been hunting with me for almost 20 years now.
Wow.
And still come back every year. So that's awesome. I love that. I've got a buddy here right now. He's been here, I think this is his probably 13th or 15th year, something like that, hunting with me. And he took an antelope first day of his hunt, and he's actually staying because he's going to start bear hunting actually tomorrow. It opens on the 2nd, so he's going to start bear hunting.
Well, that's super cool, Fred. So going back, you were the first one to complete the 29 big game animals with a recurve bow. Now, talk about kind of how that got started and what was the idea behind, hey, I want to go out and do this.
You know what? It kind of started. Fred Bear was always one of my heroes, one of my mentors, and it kind of started with, man, I'd love to experience everything Fred Bear experienced. I didn't have the money or would probably never have the resources to go after, elephants and tigers and some of the crazy stuff that Fred hunted. But I thought, man, if I could shoot everything Fred experienced in North America, I would love to experience that, because reading Fred Bear's field notes had such a profound impact on me as a young man. Reading, his stories, and Fred had such a great way of describing everything, not just the animal he was hunting, but the people, the terrain, the climate, the challenges, everything about it. So I really loved the way he would explain and tell a story. So that was my goal. And then back in I guess it was probably the latter part of the 80s, Chuck Adams completed the Super Slam. And I had never heard of that. I'd never heard of the Super Slam. Chuck Adams was the one that named it. And that was, at the time, I think it was the 27 species. They've added the Thule, and I'm trying to think of the other one they added. I should know that right off the top of my head, but I didn't get a whole lot of sleep the last few days because I've been guiding. But needless to say, Chuck finished the Super Slam, and I thought, wow, that's got to be like the Everest of bow hunting. And I wondered if I was tough enough and mentally and physically to try and harvest all the species in North America. And I thought, boy, if I could do that with a traditional bow, I would love to know, just to learn about the species, learn about the people in the areas where those animals were found, the different terrain, the different weather conditions I would encounter. So that it really kind of started as, that'll be my life goal. Maybe one day I'll get it completed, maybe I won't. And, living in Colorado, what's great is they've got 10 of now it's 29 species, almost a third of a little over a third of the 29 species right here in Colorado. So I probably did the cheapest Super Slam ever because I did the majority of them self-guided. I drew a lot of tags on public land. Some of the animals, I had to go with an outfitter, and in those situations I certainly, I certainly did. But in all the other situations where it was possible for me to maybe go by myself, I did a lot of them self-guided. And I traded out a lot of hunts, too. I would call guys up and say, hey, I'll take you mountain lion hunting or I'll take you elk hunting if you'll take me out for this or that. So, I did some swapping and trading. And when I started getting close, about 17 to 18 animals, I thought, wow, this may be an attainable goal. So,
was there ever a time
that's what got it going?
Was there ever a time that you kind of doubted whether it was going to be possible with the recurve bow, especially going on, DIY? I'm sure you had a lot of, not failures, but lack of a better term, not successes.
Oh, no, there were plenty of failures, Cody. Yeah, no, there were many times I questioned whether I could do it. Not only if I had the physical and mental stamina to do it, but also if I had the, efficiency to do it. I considered myself a good shot with a recurve, but man, some of the situations you get yourself in, whether it's shooting in 115, 120 degree weather, down in Arizona trying to get a cow's deer, or whether I was polar bear hunting and it was negative 20. So there were a lot of times, Dall sheep, for example. I didn't get a Dall sheep until my third Dall sheep hunt, and I literally thought, man, I'm just not good enough to get a sheep with a bow. That's all there is to it. And when I finally managed to do it, it really, I was like, wow, I did it. So there were quite a few times that, whether through failed stalks or, terrible weather or opportunities that I just didn't make happen. There were a few times I certainly wondered if I would ever get it done.
So did you ever kind of second guess your decision to do it with a recurve? I mean, having no one ahead of you ever done it with a recurve bow, it could seem like, well, maybe it's not doable, and it's easy to doubt yourself when it's not been done before. So what was some of the challenges there?
Well, a lot of challenges because, like you said, there really nobody had done it. There was a friend of mine named Rick Dugan, and actually he was almost on par. I think I had quite a few, and I would talk to Rick, and he had quite a few, and Rick beat me to 27 or 28, and then I beat him to 29. Not that it was a race between us, but it was a neat thing to accomplish. And it was also kind of neat knowing there were a few other guys that had almost done it or almost completed it. To this day, I think me and Rick are the only two people that have done it with traditional equipment. Although there's a couple guys that I'm really pulling for with a longbow, which to me is even more of a challenge. Some guys that are getting close to accomplishing that with the longbow, but really it was always a personal quest for me more than anything. I was fortunate in the fact that for a lot of it, especially the last animals I had, a professional cameraman, Easton, had asked me to work with them on Easton bow hunting. So I was fortunate enough to kind of capture a lot of it on video, which was really neat for me. But it was a personal goal, wondering if I could actually do that, if I could accomplish all that.
Oh, I'm sure. So going back, what was the hardest hunt out of those 29?
The hardest, I would honestly say, were probably all of them, but they're all difficult in their own way, if that makes sense, Cody. Sometimes it's because of weather, sometimes it's because of terrain, sometimes it's because of, the animal itself, sometimes it's because of where you're hunting. I hunted some areas, some public land areas that had a lot of pressure that were extremely difficult areas to hunt. But I would say if I had to pick a species out of the 29, I would say it was the sheep. And the sheep were tough because of all three, really. The physical, conditioning, the mental conditioning, just to be up in that terrain for, a couple weeks at a time. And because of the open terrain that sheep are found in, to try and close within recurve distance was really, I love that part of it, but that's also the part that made it probably really difficult as well.
So with all these species, and a lot of them you had never hunted before, you're from Colorado, obviously you had almost a third of them, but how did you adapt your hunting style to the animals you were hunting, or was it just that you kept the same hunting style with everything?
Oh, good question. I've never had that question, and I would say I try and adapt. There's been a lot of animals that, like you said, I didn't know anything about. I'd never hunted them. I would always try and do as much research as I could. I would watch videos. If somebody had harvested a mountain caribou on video, I was going to watch that on TV, or I would rent the video or buy the video that had it, so I could get used to looking at the animal and seeing the terrain and watching how another bow hunter, had gotten in range. So I really did a lot of research, as much as I could, whether it was reading articles or watching TV shows or buying, DVDs or VHS tapes back then, depending on when it was, on how to hunt that particular species. And then when I went out, I would take what I had learned about hunting over the years and try and apply it.
So throughout your 29 animals, did you ever keep a journal or anything to kind of keep track of what worked and what didn't work? No, it's kind of in my head. I did keep a journal of where I was, what dates, when I harvested the animals, tags, and some just key notes that I wanted to have on, wow, I shot this sheep and it was pouring rain, things like that. But yeah, there's been so many, like most bow hunters, I like to think that, there's always a ton of failed stalks and, missed opportunities when the wind switched and things like that. And that would be, that would be hard to even count all those. You'd have a huge notebook. It wouldn't just be a journal, huh?
Right, exactly. Yes, it would be. It would fill up a caravan, I'm sure.
Well, like any good hunter, I think we learn more from our mistakes than our successes.
Oh, I'd agree. I definitely learned from a lot of my mistakes, and I really think, trapping, for example, is kind of a lost art, but trapping really taught me a lot about animals, animal behavior, scents, my scent, what it did, how to try and alleviate as much as I could, how important it was, and then the time that I had spent guiding. I'm still learning every day, when I'm guiding and, when I'm watching animals and animal behavior. So, I'm constantly trying to learn and trying to employ the things that I've learned, and not only my hunts, but other people's hunts, into what I'm doing.
It's funny, I hear that a lot, is that some of the best hunters, they really started out trapping. And I don't know if that's causation or correlation, but it seems that a lot of really great hunters spent their time trapping and learning woodsman skills with small game. Now, in your opinion, what species of animal, and it doesn't have to be big game animals, but what species of animal that you hunt or have hunted has made you the best hunters out of everything?
Man, you know what? Coyotes, I would probably put them right up there, whether it was trapping or hunting them, because coyotes are super adaptable, super smart. They're found all over the country. So, hunting coyotes, and of course whitetails. I mean, that's what the majority of guys chase. I grew up hunting whitetails, and a white-tailed deer is absolutely amazing. I mean, again, they're super adaptable and super wary when it comes to, whether it's noise or sound or scent. So, the things that I've learned chasing coyotes specifically, and then the things that I've learned, hunting white-tailed deer and growing up hunting whitetails, I think really helped me in everything I do.
Nice. And it's funny, you hear a different answer from everyone, and I don't know if that just goes back to, what people hunted growing up and kind of what they've spent the most time or what that equates to.
Well, I would almost say for me, the whitetail, because, having worked for bear archery down in Florida and growing up kind of in the swamps and, hunting whitetail deer, hogs, and Osceola turkeys, when I came out west, I'll be honest, I thought, man, I've hit the jackpot. I was young when I moved out here. I think I was 18 or 19 years old when I moved to Colorado to manage the archery shop for a friend, and I was like, wow, man, mule deer are not nearly as spooky as whitetails, and elk are huge and easy to track, and they bugle, so you know where they're at. So when I got here, I was just like, wow, this is awesome. And the nice thing about growing up in the South is that hunting seasons were so liberal. I mean, I could literally legally harvest 2 deer a day for 6 months. So as a teenager, really, I had harvested more deer than guys that had been hunting in Colorado their whole life, because they could only kill 1 deer a year in most cases. So that experience of growing up and being able to harvest multiple deer, a day or per year, I think like anything, it's time spent afield and experiences. Every single one teaches you. And, I think the huge plus I had was, besides growing up trapping, spending so much time whitetail hunting, it gave me a huge leg up, I'll say, on, what I needed to do.
So when you were younger and hunting the whitetails, did you use a recurve then, or was that something that developed later?
No, even though I was a dyed-in-the-wool Fred Bear fan, it's funny because I got into the compound. I thought the compound was the coolest thing ever, and still, of course, an amazing weapon. But the compound was my thing, and I was actually given a custom Fred Bear recurve from Frank Scott, who had worked at Bear Archery since he was in his teens, and at the time he was in his 70s, and he gave me a recurve and said, Fred, you really, really would enjoy this. And it wasn't until I started working for Jim Widmeyer, the late Jim Widmeyer. Unfortunately, he passed away. He owned Aerodynamics in Fort Collins, Colorado, and Jim was a hardcore traditional guy, and one of his good friends was Mike Palmer, another hardcore traditional guy. And between the two of them, and watching how much fun they had with traditional equipment, I was like, wow, I think I'm going to put this compound down and start shooting traditional. And that's what I did, and loved it, and was strictly traditional, honestly, until I started working with the guys at Easton and Hoyt. And one of the reasons that came about is they said, Fred, we'd like you to, be the host of a TV show. We'd like to show our products, and we'd like you to kind of be a spokesman, which of course I was honored to do. But they said, hey, we know you grew up shooting a compound as well, and we'd like you to do a few hunts with a compound. And I think as much as anything, just to show that, the two different weapons, and there's advantages and disadvantages to each. There's been certain situations where I went, wow, I wish I had my compound here. And, there were certain situations where I went, man, a recurve's the perfect weapon to have here. So, it was kind of nice to, all-inclusive as well, to show people that I was kind of a Big Ten theory guy, and I really think no matter what weapon anybody's hunting with, if you're out there and you're hunting ethically and safely and you're doing it for the right reasons, and I'm 100% behind it, no matter what you're carrying in your hand.
Yeah, that's really important. I think a lot of people in this industry tend to pick teams, so to speak, and I love that you're kind of be able to hunt with everything, and you have your own ARs, and you'll do it even to the AR to the traditional bow, and there's no bias. So that's great to see someone that can use everything.
Well, thanks. I grew up using everything. My dad was a big muzzleloader hunter as well, and my dad took advantage, like a lot of hunters do, of more time afield. So he would look at it and go, wow, I can hunt with a bow, and then I can hunt with a muzzleloader, and then I can hunt with a rifle, and then when turkey season comes in, I may take my bow or my shotgun, and when duck season or dove season's here, I'm going to grab my shotgun. So I've really enjoyed spending more time afield, and also introducing my boys to everything. I want them to choose whatever they enjoy the most, but at the same time, I want them to be efficient with as many different weapons as they can be. I like them to be confident in a recurve, and a longbow, and a compound, and a shotgun, a rifle, a pistol. It's a lot of fun, and you can enjoy a lot more experiences.
So when you started teaching your boys how to hunt and shoot a bow, did you start them out on a longbow, a recurve, or a compound, or what was the mindset or the thought behind that?
Really, it wouldn't have mattered much to me, but because they all started pretty young, I think it's really important that they get the idea of how a bow works, and so I started all of them off with traditional equipment, recurve and longbow, and really that's the way I started. Even though I said I started hunting with a compound, that's true, but my first bow as a super small boy was a small fiberglass, bow with those little wooden arrows with the little points that were crimped on to the end of it, and that's how I kind of started to understand in my own little mind trajectory, and if it was further, I had to hold higher, and I think learning the basics are a really good idea, and really the same way with a muzzleloader. I enjoy teaching the boys about muzzleloaders because I think it's important that they understand that there's something that's going to send a spark to the charge, and then basically it's an explosion that's taking place inside the enclosed steel barrel, and that's what sends the projectile out the end. And I think that's an important part of the learning process.
Oh yeah, and it's the fundamentals, and I think that's traditional equipment or open sights or things like that will teach you the fundamentals early. So throughout the years, and using a recurve bow or traditional equipment, do you feel like that's given you an advantage with your hunting skills or outdoorsmanship?
I do, and don't get me wrong. I think all the equipment's great. My wife and my boys enjoy both as well, but for me, in most hunting situations, a traditional bow really gives a guy an advantage in the field. And I say that because, one, it's quieter. You can draw it smoother. It doesn't matter really how strong you are. Drawing a compound, when you break the cam or the wheel over, you're gonna have a little bit of a jolt. You can draw a recurve or a longbow a lot smoother, a lot slower. You can also shoot it faster. You don't have to worry about pins. You don't have all the things that compounds have on them. So there's been many, many situations where I've thought, wow, I would have never harvested that animal without a recurve or a longbow. And the biggest, I guess, argument, or the biggest thing that a lot of people bring up with me is, well, Fred, it's not as long. It's not really a long-range weapon, and I can shoot further with my compound. And I'll agree with that 100%. A recurve or a longbow isn't a long-range weapon, but really, bow hunting to me isn't a long-range sport. Even a fast compound today that's maybe going 330 feet per second is still going to miss its target if a guy misjudges the yardage out at 30 or 40 yards by 5 to 6 yards. You're going to miss your target, especially if it's a whitetail-sized animal. So I've done a lot of research, and one thing I like to point out is the average whitetail in Pope and Young, and I talked to the guys at Pope and Young. I was doing some research on what's the average shot distance that these Pope and Young whitetails are shot at, and it's under 30 yards. I think it was closer to 25 yards, and it used to be even closer than that, but even still today, I think it still hovers around that 25-yard range. Mm-hmm. And that is right in the wheelhouse for a guy shooting a recurve or a longbow, and part of the joy for me is getting close. But once you get close, 25 yards and under, the Recurve or a longbow is just a quiet, easy weapon to shoot, and one you can shoot really fast. So yeah, for me personally, I think it's a more efficient hunting weapon in a lot of situations.
No, I'd agree with that, and I don't know how you would find the statistic, but I think that also you'll see that a lot of opportunities are missed because the time that it takes to take a shot. If an animal steps out in front of you in a split second, the time that it takes you to range that animal, draw your bow, level your bow, pick a sight is, not a long time, but it's far longer than it would take with a traditional equipment.
Oh, 100%. I had a guy miss an elk just 2 days ago for the same exact reason. Whereas with a traditional bow, it would have been it would have been a quick, relatively easy shot. When somebody's trying to, make all these adjustments and range and then figure out, boy, I got to choose my pin, or with the sliding pins, I need to slide my pin. There's a lot of, steps to that.
Yeah. So just in your guiding outfit, just with elk, hypothetically, what's the average distance on a bow shot?
Wow, good question. It varies so much, whether we're in a tree stand or on the ground calling or sitting on an ag field. Archery average, I would say it was probably somewhere between that 20 and 30 yard mark. That's probably the average shot distance. But I can tell you an interesting statistic that I've tracked for a long time. And I wrote a book called Bow Hunting Western Big Game a few years ago. And I talked to a bunch of other guides, elk guides, that spend a lot of their time a year, guiding elk hunters. And it was almost exactly the same across the board. For I have to call in 10 elk within bow range for a hunter to kill one. So in other words, for every 10 elk I call into bow range, and let's call bow range, just for the sake of argument, 30 yards and under. For every elk I call into bow range, on the ground, I would have a client kill 1 out of 10. And it's similar in my own hunting as well. I would, usually kill 1 out of 10. Mm-hmm. Now, when I've got a client or myself, if I'm in a tree, for every elk that walks in 30 yards or under of that tree stand or that ground blind, we kill 7 out of 10.
Wow.
So it's exponentially higher. So I usually talk to my clients about when people watch elk hunting on TV or when they think of elk hunting, that's always that bugling bull that's coming into the call, and that's fun and exciting, and that's a great way to shoot elk. I've had a blast calling them in for clients, and I've had a ton of clients shoot them that way. But as far as the most efficient or the highest percentage, when you're calling an elk on the ground, every single sense is alert. He's coming in trying to hear you, trying to smell you, trying to see you. Every sense is alert. If it's a bull coming into a bugle, he's coming in to fight. He's not sure if that bull's bigger than him, smaller than him, and he's running in to check it out. But elk are smart, and he's usually going to try and circle downwind. He's going to try and spot you. He's going to try and hear you and smell you and identify what he's coming into. And when you're sitting in a tree stand or a ground blind and an elk's walking by, of course those senses are still in action, but they're not at their highest peak alert. They're walking down a trail, maybe with other elk. They're going to water. They're going to agriculture. They're going to bed, or they're going to feed. It's a lot calmer elk. And when they walk by in that situation, by placing a ground blind or a tree stand in the proper place, you get a calm elk in a broadside situation as opposed to one running in with every sense alert. So, elk hunting's taught me a lot, but percentage-wise, I've learned that's a lot higher percentage as far as number of elk seen to harvest an animal.
So is that kind of your favorite tactic? And does that change if you have clients that are looking for a particular size of animal? I mean, obviously, if you have a blind or a tree stand, you're very limited to what is using that area. Now, that could be argued that you have scouts, cameras, things like that. But is that kind of your favorite tactic for both, or is that just on a purely success rate?
On purely success rate, I'm getting shots. That's the highest thing. I don't really guide a lot of, trophy hunters. We have a lot of elk, and that's what makes it fun. If a guy's really going, man, Fred, I want a 350 bull, you know what I mean? I say, well, you're probably going to want to go to Arizona or New Mexico or go with somebody that has a lot of, really big trophy bulls. We have a lot of elk, but, we're still, telling people, wow, that's a nice 5x5. I'd probably shoot him and get some great elk meat and it's a trophy. But I can tell you that we we vary and change up our tactics based on the time of year. If it's early in the season, they're not really talking. They're still on their normal routines from feeding and bedding areas. If you're hunting dry country, water holes is a huge plus. Then we're doing a lot more stand and water holes and things like that. If it's the peak of the rut, I still have a ton of luck over agriculture, water holes and wallows and things like that. But at least you increase your odds of calling more elk in. A lot of times you can get those more experiences, or those multiple repeat close calls until you get a guy an opportunity. So, it definitely varies based on weather, what time of year it is, based on the rut. So there's a lot of variables that come into play. But yeah, I would say, if a guy says to me, Fred, my hunt's going to be made if I am chasing elk on the ground and bugling, then that's what we're going to do, and that's a fun way to hunt. I just explained to him that, hey, we may have a lot of close encounters, and you may never get a good shot, or we may not get that perfect broadside animal. If somebody says to me, hey, I really want to take an elk home, what's the best odds for me? Then I may say, hey, you know what, our best odds is getting on this trail where we know they're going back and forth between feeding and bedding, or on this wallow or on this water hole, because if the elk comes by, we're going to have a really good shot at him, odds are.
Nice. So, not to throw any of your clients under the bus or anything, but what are some of the types of mistakes that you see the most with different clients, and as far as all aspects of hunting, and not necessarily just elk, but what are some of the biggest mistakes you see?
In 23 years of guiding, I've seen all of them, and have made a bunch of them myself. But probably some of the biggest mistakes, I think, are either underestimating the animal, getting yourself in a position where you can't shoot, setting up. The toughest thing about elk, especially on the ground, is if you come from out east and try and hunt elk and you're not used to hunting on the ground, little things like setting up in the shade of a tree instead of a spot where it's sunlight, setting up in an area where you've got enough cover to break up your outline, but you're not in so much cover that if a bull comes in around behind you or to the side of you, that you can still draw and shoot. I've had guys get backed up into trees and had elk 20 yards, but because it wasn't perfectly in front of them, they had backed up into a tree so much they literally could look at the elk, but they could never draw their bow and turn to shoot without breaking limbs. So there's all kinds of little mistakes made, from not checking their equipment, not having their bow set too high if it's a compound or a recurve, where it's a struggle, especially when you're tired. It's one thing when you're at your peak physical shape and you're standing out in the front yard and you're drawing your bow. It's a totally different thing when you're cramped up in a twisted position, or you're kneeling down on the ground and now you're trying to draw your bow. So overbowing is a very, very common mistake. I tell guys I'd much rather them shoot a lighter bow they can draw really easily than a bow that they're going to struggle with, especially if they're tired, out of breath, what I mean, maybe a little weak because of hiking in the mountains for a couple days. So that's a real common mistake I see. Camouflage is another big one. A lot of guys, don't feel the need for, camo paint or camo gloves or head nets or, something to break up that bright, shiny face and, kind of white hands that stand out in dark timber and, different situations. So there's a lot of little things that can make a big difference.
So I guess the flip side of that question is what are the habits that successful hunters like yourself are doing or are great at? What are the common habits between successful hunters?
Simplifying things. Whether it's a compound or a recurve or your equipment, get things as simple as possible. Although I think on the 3D range, a lot of times the sliding pins are super popular. Every one of my guides has had difficulty with clients with the sliding pins because, an elk may come running in and my guide will say it's 34 yards and all of a sudden you got a guy trying to adjust his sliding pin to 34 yards. So, I think having, 2 or 3 pins set at, maybe 10, 20, 30 or, 20, 30, and 40, something that you practice with all the time, knowing your equipment. That's huge. If you only pick up that bow a week before you go hunting or a week before you go on a guided hunt, you're doing yourself a disservice and the animal a disservice in a way. So, I think knowing your equipment, knowing your limitations is another big one. Knowing, what range you are confident in. There's a lot of different variables that come into play there. But most of the guys that I know that are experienced and are really successful hunters, it's like a chess game. One, they're thinking about all the options, where the animal may go, where it may not go. They're looking at the wind, they're looking at the sun, they're looking at, what's the weather going to be 30 minutes from now. If I sit up here and I'm in the shade, in 30 minutes, is the sun going to come up and then I'm going to be, right in the sunlight? There's all those little tiny factors that by themselves aren't a big deal, but when you take 10 tiny little factors and add them up, it can become a very large deal that'll make the difference between success and failure oftentimes.
So I see a lot of great hunters, and some of them are very, very patient type people, and then some of them are very aggressive type people. So it's hard to take away what's the best answer for that. But what do you think makes a great hunter? Patience or just knowledge of animals combined with the advancement or aggressive tactics? What's your thoughts?
Good question, and there's not one method that's better than the other, in my opinion. I think being able to switch back and forth, being able to go from a patient hunter that may sit and not move for 13 hours if you're watching a trail or watching a certain area, as opposed to being able to flip over and get real aggressive with your tactics. And 1 second you're standing patiently, and the next second you realize because of the animal, the situation, or the terrain, you may have to take off running, breaking branches, and pressure an animal. I think in my opinion, there's not a one size fits all. I can't say, well, being a patient hunter is more successful or being a aggressive hunter is more successful, because I think the most successful hunters can switch back and forth between both and pick the right time to do either.
Yeah, your idol, or I guess both of our idols, the Fred Bear, was always preaching that the patience was the way to go, and I just don't know if I ever. I definitely didn't have it in me when I was younger. As I get older, I think I have. I don't know if I have more patience or the ability to withhold my ADD, so to speak, but maybe someday I'll be a patient, wise hunter like yourself.
Well, I don't know if I'm wise, but I can switch up between patient and running through the woods. So I think that's a key, being able to switch your tactics up, based on what the moment calls for.
So Fred, I got to ask you, what would you consider yourself world class at?
Oh gosh, nothing. I wouldn't say I'm world class at anything. I'm a lucky guy that gets to hunt for a living, and I'm fortunate in the fact that, between guiding hunters and hunting myself, I've got a lot of experience. But even with that experience, I make wrong decisions all the time. Constantly learning, constantly striving. But I think that jack of all trades, master of none definitely suits. I think I definitely fall right into that category.
So if you could go back and give your 20 to 25-year-old self some advice, some key wisdom, what advice would you give yourself?
Have fun. That's the key, and I think I've done a pretty good job at that. I think, I wouldn't say I have a whole lot of regrets. I think whatever decision I made at the time felt like the right decision. Whether that was in life or whether that was in hunting, it may have later turned out not to be the best decision in life or in hunting, but at the time it felt like the right one. So I would say always go with what you feel is best. And I don't know, maybe save some more money would be smart. Don't blow it all on hunting. Maybe put a little money in the bank would be a good idea. But no, I guess I would just say keep going for it.
I appreciate it. So I want to go over some quick gear tips to kind of finish up here. So what is some of the gear that you have to have or must have gear pieces for every hunt?
Boots I think are huge. I literally live in my boots. I probably spend maybe 2 weeks a year in a pair of cowboy boots and maybe 2 weeks a year and a pair of sneakers, but that's about it. Other than that, I'm wearing my hunting boots. I think there's two different ones that I'm huge fans of. I think the Canatrex and the Mendels are two of the best hunting boots out there, in my opinion. I've often switched back and forth between those. But I think a good pair of boots, you're done if you have sore feet or you're getting blisters. I really think good boots are super important. Good clothing is another thing that'll run you off a mountain. For clothing, I think clothing's really important. One, on the camouflage side, there's a bunch of different camo patterns out there, and so many now that, sometimes it's confusing. You can look at a camo pattern and go, wow, I really don't know what that is. I really like the large broken up patterns. I really like Max 1. I think that, to me, is one of my favorite patterns in the woods, whether I'm hunting, in Florida or whether I'm hunting in Alaska. For clothing, I think that's super important. Having quality clothing, it's something you really just can't skip on. Something that's not going to tear, that's made for, the hardcore hunter. And when I say hardcore hunter, it can be a guy that spends all day in a whitetail stand in Kansas. When you're hunting, it's rough on clothing. So I'm a huge fan of First Light. Those guys are hunters. They're not engineers. They're not scientists. These guys are mountain climbers. Everybody I've met over there is a hunter, and those guys design gear. If I was a clothing designer, they think of things that I would go, wow, this is what I really want to have. So I've really been impressed with First Light, the layering programs they have, and the fact that it's really lightweight gear, so I can carry a lot of layers without really having to bulk up my pack. So, I think clothing is every bit as important as boots and your knife and your weapon and everything else that you have every time you go out.
So on the First Light, what kind of stuff or what kind of garments are you wearing?
I'm wearing all their stuff. I've got their hooded shirts I love. I wear their T-shirts constantly because of the wool. You know what I mean? That chamois wool is just amazing. So I wear that. The pants, the pocket side pants, I love those. Wear those pretty much no matter what I'm doing. They're long underwear. The First Light socks are super comfortable. They've kept me from getting blisters. I've even, they've got a pair of gaiters that are awesome. I really pretty much use that pretty much all the time. I like the thin stuff because I can constantly layer. I don't like big bulky jackets or big bulky pants. I think they tend to make too much noise, and that's the other reason I like First Light. Those guys are hunters. They're mountain climbers. Those guys are pretty hardcore, and they design gear for hardcore users. When I'm hunting, especially bow hunting, I don't want clothing to snag on anything, and if it does snag, I don't really want it to rip, you know what I mean, or run. So that's really, to me, that's super important. I don't want to hit a bowstring on a big puffy jacket, and I have that happen every year with clients. Sometimes guys will be walking behind me, and I can hear them swishing through the woods, and I'm like, oh, please, here, take my First Light. Take my First Light jacket, or take my First Light long sleeve T-shirt, because it's gonna really it's gonna quiet you down. So.
Yeah, it's definitely quiet when you're moving through the woods, and there's nothing worse than hunting with your buddy that doesn't have good gear and he's just swooshing and just so loud.
Oh, it's unreal. And trust me, it's even harder to take that another notch when it's a client, to be on a guided hunt, and not only do you want to try and harvest him an animal, but you're trying your best. And you're working your butt off to try and get that animal in range, and you realize that his own worst enemy is him.
Yeah, no kidding.
For equipment, it's really whatever feels right to people. The bow that feels right to me may not feel right to the next guy. So I tell people to really go through and find something that just fits you. For me, it's the Hoyt Buffalo for a recurve. I helped design that, so I was really fortunate. I don't think there's a hunter out there that doesn't go, boy, I wish I could tweak this, or I wish I could make this a little different, or make this just what I want. And so it was a really fun opportunity for me working with Hoyt to go, I want this is what I want in a hunting recurve. I want this, and I want this, and I want this, and I want this. And literally, Hoyt came out here with the engineers and literally let me design for me, what was the perfect hunting bow from every aspect. I wanted one that, I didn't need tools to put it together or take it apart. I wanted to take down because I travel, or, if I wanted to put it in my backpack, so that was a really fun, that was a fun project, and that's my go-to for the Recurve. For the compound, I like I really like the Hoyt Spider, the Hoyt Carbon Matrix. If I go technology, I go all out. I want something that's light, that's fast, that can work with me. For other equipment, not doing without. Optics are huge too. As a guide, I spend a lot of time looking through glass, whether it's a spotting scope or binoculars. So I think having quality stuff is huge. And just because, I'm a big fan of the great country we live in, whenever possible, I try and, choose USA products. And my wife's even a freak about that. When we go to the grocery store, or I fibbed, I should say, when she goes to the grocery store, I try not to go to town. I try not to go to town too much. But she actually makes an effort, when she's buying food to see if it's made in the USA as well. So, whenever possible, I really try and support the companies that are made in the USA.
That's awesome. Hey, I might have you stumped on this one, so you'll have to check me. But what's one piece of gear, and it could be, I would like to do under $100, but what's one piece of gear that you're not sponsored by that you find yourself telling all your buddies or all your hunting fans or all your hunting friends about?
I'm trying to think what my GPS, because I'm not sponsored by Garmin, but a GPS is pretty handy, but it's probably close to that $100 mark. Just the mark stuff. You know what I mean? Being able to, I think woodsmanship skills are super important, and I like to know where I'm at all times, and I think I do a pretty good job of that. But it is nice to use a good GPS and go, I know exactly where your bull is, and we're going to mark it, or hey, we need to give this animal a little time and mark exactly that spot. Mm-hmm. And when you're in dark timber, and or it's getting night, or even if it is in the dark, it's nice to have that piece of equipment. So I encourage all my guides and everybody, I said, hey, you may not use it all the time, but a lightweight GPS is a pretty important thing to have.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's good for journaling types of stuff, or, where you've seen elk or where you've seen sign and things like that, and then putting that back together back at camp.
Right. No, exactly. So, yeah, I'm not sponsored by any of those guys, and but I do carry a GPS, and I encourage people to do that. So, I think that's right around that $100 mark. So that would probably be the biggest one I could tell you about.
Okay. Well, appreciate you sharing all the big tips and info with us, Fred, and hopefully maybe we can have you on again coming up this winter for coyote season, and we can talk about predators. But what else do you got coming down the pipe for us with the Easton bow hunting and Predator Nation?
Well, doing a lot more hunts. Got a bunch planned, not only guiding here. I've got a group of 6 elk hunters coming in that have been hunting with me for years. They'll be in here. They arrive not tomorrow, but the next day. And then they've got multiple tags, so really excited about that. They've got elk, bear, deer, turkey, antelope, a little bit of everything, so it's going to be a fun hunt. But for my hunts, I've got some great Easton bow hunting hunts. I've got 2 elk tags here in Colorado. I've got 3 bear tags in my pocket. I've got antelope tags. So really looking forward to getting out and doing some hunting myself after my clients are done. And then I'm doing a few shows for Ford Outfitters. So that's really a lot of fun too. I've got an elk hunt up in, I believe it's Washington for them, and then a mule deer hunt that I'm doing in Alberta for those guys. So I've always got a lot of stuff coming down the pike, and then we picked up a couple mountain lions on our stealth cam cameras this last week, so I'm really looking forward to lion season starting as well. So I'm chomping at the bit for all of it.
Yeah, it's a rough life you live, Fred, but it's amazing that you keep it all together. I mean, most guys would have a hard time with even one of your projects, but you seem to pull it all together.
Well, thanks. I do have a lot going, but I've got some absolutely great guides. I've got a pretty amazing wife that helps keep it organized. We've got an office manager, and she's amazing as well. And, I've got a lot of really good people that help out with a bunch of it. I wish I could take all the credit.
Well, good luck this year, and thanks for chatting with us, Fred.
Cody, it's my pleasure, buddy.
All right, have a good one. Hey guys, thanks for listening, and we hope you enjoyed the show and maybe even picked up a few tips along the way. Join us right here every Thursday morning for more interviews and great hunting tips. And be sure to help us out by leaving a review on iTunes. For more information about this show and the rest of our guests, check out the show notes for links and additional resources on our website, www.therichoutdoors.net. This episode is brought to you by GameCallSupply.com, the online authority in hunting calls. GameCallSupply.com not only has everything you need to call elk, deer, ducks, predators, turkeys, whatever your hunting choice is. They're obsessed with calling animals and have all the resources you need to become a better caller and a better hunter. With great prices and fast shipping, you'll have your calls in no time and be on your way to your hunting stand. Check them out and use the Rich Outdoors Podcast special offer code TRO to get 15% off your entire order.